Nathan Parker, an instructor for FreeMagicSchool.com. Today I'm going to address some questions that a lot of you guys have posted about a tutorial I put on the website entitled Mind Reading. In this effect, you have two small objects, and while your back is turned, a spectator chooses one of the two objects, and then you proceed to tell them which object they chose. I won't go through the demonstration portion in this video since there's already a video for that. Instead, I'm going to try and answer the questions you guys had. Okay, so one of the more common questions we had about this effect was, what if the spectator uses the wrong hand to pick up the object? The way that we try to condition the spectator to use the right hand for the right object is, at the beginning of the effect, we have our hands laying on the table as such, and we ask the spectator to lay their hands on the table exactly the same way across from us. This way, more than likely, with their hands positioned like this, they will pick this object up with this hand and this one up with this hand. Now, I would say that 99% of the time this method is going to work. But if you're not comfortable with that, and if you have one of the other concerns was, maybe on certain skin tones the method, the way the effect works, wouldn't work for people of darker skin. So I'm going to try to go through a couple of ways that you can use an alternative method to get the same result in this effect. Alright, like I said before in the last video, you can use any two small objects. This time I have a small card and a magician's Rubik's Cube. What I'm going to do to set up for this method here is I'm going to take the Rubik's Cube, and as you can see, this has playing cards on each side. So for this method of the effect, there's a little bit of setup. I'm going to set the Rubik's Cube so that this king of diamonds is facing towards me on the table, and I'm going to set the car up sideways, perfectly sideways. I'm going to try to have both objects perfectly symmetrical to each other and centered in regards to each other. So now when I turn around and close my eyes while the spectator's picking their object, and they hold it up to their head for 20 seconds, however long, once they put it down, more than likely, whichever object they put back down is going to be moved. So say the spectator picks up the block here. They hold it to their head for 20 seconds, and then they set it back down on the table. Two things you're going to look for. One, you're very quickly, now when you turn back around using this method, you want to very quickly glance down at the objects. First thing you're going to look for is, has one of the objects been moved slightly? In this case, I can very quickly tell that the block has been moved because it's no longer centered with the car. I can also tell that the block was chosen because now the king of diamonds isn't facing me, it's facing over here because of the way the spectator set it down. Same thing if they chose this item. They hold it up to their head while our back's turned. They set it back down. When I turn around and close my eyes, or turn around and open my eyes rather, I can see that the car is not perfectly centered anymore, which tells me that they chose the car. So, important key to using this method for the effect is to, when you turn around, and open your eyes, you just want to make a quick glance at the objects to determine if they've been moved or whatnot. So that's another method where you're looking for movement, and you're setting your objects straight across from each other and symmetrical with each other. So this way you can tell when the spectator sets it down whether it's been moved or not. And if the object that has been moved is the object that they picked. Alright, now we'll move on to a slightly different method for this. If you don't like the first method of the hand color thing, which we went over in the first video, and if you don't like this method of object placement being used to determine which one they chose, then we will move to a third method. I'll put the car away this time, and this time I have a small Bible. So this time we're using a Bible and the Rubik's Cube. Like I said, this pretty much any small object will work for this. This time I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier with the cube. I'm going to, beforehand, this is all set up here. I'm going to place the Queen of Spades facing me on the table. And on this small Bible, I'm going to, it's kind of hard to see, it says New Testament there. I'm going to place it to where, even with the cube again, but I'm going to place it to where the word New in Testament is upside down from my point of view when I look at it. From the spectator's point of view, it's right side up. So I know that the Queen of Spades is pointing towards me, and I know that the writing on top here is upside down from my view. Alright, so you've started your pattern for this effect, you've turned around, the spectator is going to pick an object, put it up to their head for 20 or so seconds, lay it back down, and then you turn around, open your eyes, take a glance, and this time they chose the Bible or the small book here, and I can tell that they chose that because now it has been moved and the words on the top are right side up from my view. So that tells me that they chose this one. And of course the same thing would apply if they chose the cube, because more than likely the Queen of Spades would not be facing myself. So I think the best way to accomplish this is actually to kind of use all three methods. So say that they will introduce the card back in. Alright, cube and the card. Once again, I have the Queen of Spades facing towards myself, set square on the table, and I will have the card facing myself as well, symmetrical with the block. So I'll ask the spectator to choose an item while my back's turned. Hold that item up to their head and think about it. I'll count down 20 to 25 seconds while my back's turned, and then I'll turn around after they've placed their object back on the table. Now as soon as I turn around, I'm going to look down, glance briefly at the objects, and first thing I want to look for is either object look moved. I can see right away that the block is not lined up perfectly with the car anymore. So that tells me that more than likely they picked the block. Also, my Queen is not facing me anymore, and that also tells me that they more than likely picked the block. Also, I'm going to go ahead and look at the spectator's hands as well and see if I can tell one hand appears lighter than the other because it was the hand they held here. So by combining all three methods, this is pretty much makes the effect foolproof. If you want to just use this movement method, or I guess we'll call it kind of like a key method, to where we're using a certain card on the block or a certain position for the car, or whatever object you have. You know, you use whichever one you feel more comfortable with, or I suggest trying to use a combination of all three methods. I hope this answered your questions about this effect. Hopefully this will make it a little bit easier to understand and a little bit more foolproof, so to speak, for the spectators and for yourself. If you do have any more questions about this effect or any of my other video tutorials, please feel free to send me a message or leave a comment. And as always, please send me a friend request. And thanks for watching. I'm Nathan Parker. Stay tuned for more video tutorials.